What the Sea Keeps. Chapter 1. The Harbor at Dusk. The rain eased toward evening. The town lay quiet under the gray, with gulls drifting above the harbor and the smell of the tide thick in the air. The sea had gone calm after its morning anger, leaving the boats rocking like tired men. He stood on the pier, hands in his pockets, the wet board slick beneath his boots. The letter was in his coat, folded small, the paper gone soft from the day's damp. He had read it too many times already, tracing the words as if they were carved in her. When she came down the path, she didn't hurry. Her red coat caught the last of the light, and he thought it looked too bright for this place. He watched her stop near the end of the dock and look out at the water. "You kept it," she said. "I keep most things," he said. "That's not true." He smiled without meaning to. Maybe not. They stood like that for a while, the wind between them. A boat creaked against its mooring, and somewhere a gull screamed, sharp and lonely. She looked older than he remembered, not by years, but by something in her eyes, the kind of weight that comes from leaving too often. "I thought you'd gone," he said. "I did. And yet you're here." "I heard the sea again," she said softly. "It's louder when you try to forget it." He nodded. "It always is." They walked along the dock until they reached his boat. It was small and clean, with salt dried white along the sides. The name Clara was still painted near the bow. She touched the letters with her fingertips. "You never changed it," she said. "No," he said. "Didn't seem right to." She looked at him then, really looked. "You could have. I could have done a lot of things." The rain began again, fine and cold. He pulled the collar of his coat higher, but she didn't move. She stood in it, eyes on the horizon. "Still chasing storms?" he asked. She smiled, and for a moment she was the girl he remembered, all light and laughter and defiance. "They chase me now." He lit a cigarette and offered it to her. She took it, their fingers brushing once. That was enough to bring the silence between them alive again. "I shouldn't have written," she said after a while. "I know. But you read it." "I did." She nodded. "Then we're even." He laughed, low and bitter. "We've never been even." The tide slapped gently against the pilings. The sky was darker now, a slow bruise spreading west. He thought of the letter, the part she hadn't signed, the line that said, "I still dream of the boat." He stepped aboard, then turned to her. "Come on." She hesitated. "It's late." "It's always late." She looked down at the water, black and moving. Then she stepped in. He untied the rope and pushed off. The dock slid away behind them, the town a dim shape under the low clouds. He rowed slow, steady, the way he used to, when she would hum and the sea would carry them. She sat opposite him, her hair damp, her eyes somewhere else. "You still smoke too much," she said. "And you still notice." She smiled again, smaller this time. "I thought you'd have quit by now. I thought you'd have stayed." The oars dipped and rose, and the silence between strokes was heavy. "Why come back?" he asked finally. She looked out toward the horizon. "Because I wanted to see if you still looked for me in the tide." He stopped rowing. The sea rocked them gently. "And?" She turned to him. "You do." The boat drifted. Somewhere beyond the bay, thunder grumbled, far off but coming closer. He leaned back, cigarette between his fingers, the embers small and stubborn in the wind. "What do you want from me, Clara?" She took a long time to answer. "Maybe the truth." He nodded. "That's the hardest thing to give." "I know. You wouldn't like it." "I never did." They sat in the quiet, the kind that comes after something breaks. The rain thickened, tapping the wooden sides, steady as breath. "Tell me anyway," she said. He looked at her through the dim. "I never stopped waiting." "That's the truth." Her eyes closed, and she let out a sound that wasn't quite a sigh. "That's what I was afraid of." The thunder rolled again, nearer now. He tossed the cigarette into the dark water and reached for the oars. "We should head in." But she shook her head. "Not yet." The storm wind brushed across them, cool and electric. She turned her face toward it, the red coat clinging to her shoulders. He watched her like a man watching the past come alive, beautiful and dangerous and too close. "What are you looking for out here?" he asked. "An ending," she said. "Maybe a beginning. Sometimes they're the same." He said nothing. He rowed a little farther, the sea rising under them, the line between water and sky nearly gone. Behind them, the harbor lights blinked faintly, small as memory. Ahead, the storm was waiting. And still, she didn't look back. Chapter 2. The Weight of Water. The wind came first. A low rush from the east, carrying salt and the smell of iron. Then the sea rose, black and restless, as if it had been waiting for them. He rowed harder. The oars bit into the water, the boat groaning under the strain. The rain came in sheets now, cutting across his face. She held tight to the gunwale, her hair plastered to her skin. "Do you know where you're going?" she shouted. "Does it matter?" "It always matters." He laughed once, short and bitter. "You never cared where we went before." She looked at him through the rain. "That was before I learned what getting lost costs." The wind snapped her words away, sent them tumbling across the waves. The boat lifted on a swell and crashed down again. The sea roared, cold and full of memory. He fought it like a man fighting time, knowing he couldn't win, but unwilling to yield. "Hold on," he said. "I am." Lightning tore the sky open, white and violent. For an instant, everything was visible. Her face pale, his hands raw, the line of the horizon gone to nothing. Then darkness again. She crawled closer to him, her hand on his shoulder. "Turn back." "There's no back anymore," he said. The next wave hit them broadside, filling the boat halfway. He bailed with a tin bucket, his breath sharp and ragged. She scooped with her hands, her rings catching what light was left. They didn't speak after that. There was no room for words. Only the sound of the sea, the creak of the hull, the rhythm of survival. When it passed, as all storms do, the silence was so sudden it felt strange. The rain slowed. The sky cracked open in patches of silver. They floated, spent and shaking. He dropped the oars and leaned back, closing his eyes. The waves lapped against the wood like a lullaby for the damned. She sat facing him, her coat heavy with water. "You still think the sea forgives?" she said quietly. "No," he said, "but it forgets. Sometimes that's enough." Her eyes softened. "You talk like a man who wants to be remembered. I talk like a man who's tired of ghosts." She pulled the letter from her coat. The paper was soaked, almost transparent now. The words were gone, dissolved into the night. She looked at it and let it fall into the water. It floated for a moment before sinking. "That was the last thing tying me here," she said. He watched the circle where it vanished. "Then maybe you're free." Maybe. The horizon was pale now. Morning was coming. The storm drifted west, rumbling like an old god. The air was clean, sharp with salt. He rowed again, slower this time, and the boat obeyed. The world was washed new, as if they had been the ones undone and remade. They didn't speak for a long time. Words, after storms, always sound too small. When the shoreline appeared, she leaned her head back, eyes closed. "I used to think love was supposed to save us," she said. He smiled faintly. "That's what they tell us. But it doesn't." "No. What does?" He looked toward the rising light. "Endurance, maybe." She opened her eyes. "And if we can't endure, then we drown." She nodded as if that made sense. The boat scraped the sand. He stepped out, boots sinking into the wet shore. He reached for her hand, and she took it without thinking. Together they pulled the boat up beyond the tide line. The village was waking. Smoke rose thin from chimneys. Somewhere, a bell rang the hour. She looked at him. "You still have that house on the bluff?" "Yeah. Take me there." He hesitated. "For how long?" She shrugged. "Until the rain stops." He studied her face. The years had changed her, but not the way she looked at him. That part was the same, fierce, uncertain, alive. "All right," he said. They walked along the beach, their footprints filling with water as the tide came in. The sea behind them was quiet now, pretending innocence. Halfway up the hill, she stopped to look back. "It's strange," she said, "how it all feels the same, even after everything." He followed her gaze to the water, gray and endless. "That's the curse of coming home." They reached the house as the first light broke fully over the horizon. The windows were fogged, the doors swollen from the rain. Inside, it smelled of cedar and dust. She went to the fireplace and knelt, striking a match. The flame caught slow, then steady. He watched her from the doorway. "You remember how to make coffee?" "Barely." "Good. I still remember how to drink it." That made her laugh. The sound small, tired, real. When the fire took hold, she sat back on her heels, staring into it. "You never remarried," she said. "No." "Why not?" He poured water into the pot. "I didn't want to explain you." She smiled. "I'm not that hard to explain." "Yes, you are." The wind rattled the windows. Outside, the sea murmured against the rocks, patient as ever. He brought her the coffee. She took it with both hands and blew across the surface. "You think the storm's over?" she asked. "For now. But it'll come again." It always does. She looked into the fire. Then maybe we stay until it does. He nodded. Maybe. Outside, the clouds were breaking apart, and a thin line of light ran across the water. They sat close but not touching, each lost in what had been and what might still be. The rain began again, softer this time, like a promise or a warning. And somewhere in that quiet, something unspoken passed between them, the kind of truth that doesn't need words. The rain stopped 3 days ago, and the silence afterward felt strange. The house had taken on that washed-out smell of salt and smoke. Each morning, he opened the windows to let the wind move through. Each night, she closed them again. They fell into a rhythm without speaking of it. He fixed what needed fixing: the warped door, the loose hinge on the window frame, the lamp that flickered when the tide rose. She cooked small meals, made coffee strong and black, moved quietly through the rooms as if afraid to wake something. The sea below the bluff was calm now, wide and shining under the pale October sun. Sometimes she stood at the edge, her coat open, her hair caught in the wind, and he would watch from the porch, remembering a time when he didn't have to watch her from afar. One afternoon, she came in carrying driftwood for the fire. "You still gather it," she said. "Old habit. Everything about you's an old habit." He smiled. "You're one of them." She dropped the wood by the hearth. "Then maybe you should quit me, too." He didn't answer. The kettle on the stove began to hiss. She poured the water into 2 cups and handed him one. Her fingers brushed his again, a small, accidental thing that felt deliberate. They sat at the table by the window, the sea spread before them like an old photograph. "Do you ever go down there anymore?" she asked. "Not much. The tide's taken most of the lower path. You used to say the sea was a kind of church." "I still believe that," he said. "I just stopped praying." She smiled faintly. "That's a shame. You were good at it." He looked out the window. "Faith's hard when you've seen what it can drown." She was quiet for a while. The only sound was the clock, slow and steady. Then she said, "I didn't come back for forgiveness. I didn't offer it." "Good." He looked at her. "Then why?" She took a breath. "Because I'm tired of running." He nodded. "You could have stopped anywhere." "Maybe. But this is where I started." The light shifted on her face, softer now, and he saw the woman he'd once chased through storms and ports and promises. She looked at him with that same restless hunger, the kind that isn't about wanting, but needing to be seen. He said quietly, "You think we could start again?" She looked down at her hands. "People like us don't start. We resume." He smiled. "That sounds about right." The wind came up, pushing against the windows. A single gull floated above the cliffs, silent and watchful. Later that night, after the fire had burned low, she came to the doorway of his room. The light from the hall caught her face, soft around the edges, uncertain. "I can't sleep," she said. "I know." He moved aside, and she stepped in. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands in her lap, looking at the floor. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked. "All the time." "Then say it." He hesitated. "Say what?" "That you still love me." He looked at her, the years between them folding in. "You already know that. I need to hear it." He took a breath, slow and deliberate. "I love you, Clara." Her shoulders dropped, as if the words themselves had weight. She leaned her head against him, quiet for a long time. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "I've tried not to." "Did it help?" "No." Outside, the sea murmured against the rocks, low, endless, forgiving nothing. She lifted her head, eyes shining in the half-light. "Then we're both fools." "Maybe," he said, "but at least we're the same kind." They didn't speak again. The wind shifted, the fire sighed in the next room, and somewhere below, the tide began to rise. When morning came, she was gone from the bed. The window was open, the curtains moving gently. He could hear the gulls down by the water. He rose, dressed, and went to the bluff. She was standing there in her red coat, staring out at the horizon. "You left the window open," he said. "I know. I wanted the air." He came up beside her. "You thinking of leaving?" She didn't answer right away. "No," she said finally. "Not yet." They stood there together, the sea stretching before them, calm for now, though both of them knew, as surely as the tide, that calm never lasts. Chapter 4. The Visitor. A week passed before the knock came. The mornings had been clear, the air cool enough for breath to show. He had started walking again, down the bluff path, across the wet stones, to where the surf curled and hissed. Clara stayed mostly inside, mending, reading, moving through the house like someone testing the shape of quiet. That morning, he was in the shed, oiling the oars, when he heard it. 3 knocks, slow and certain. By the time he reached the door, she was already there, her hand on the knob. A man stood on the step, tall, in a brown coat, hat pulled low. His eyes were small and searching, the kind of man who belonged more to the mainland than the sea. "Afternoon," the man said. His voice carried the flat weight of authority. She didn't smile. "You're a long way from town." "That I am. You're Clara Donovan." She paused. "Was. Still are, far as we're concerned." He nodded toward the interior. "May I?" She glanced at him, the man behind her, then stepped aside. The visitor entered, stamping his boots. He looked around the room as if taking inventory of a life. "House held up well," he said. "Surprised me, with the storms we've had." "It's solid," the man said. The visitor turned. "You must be Thomas Hale." He nodded. The man's expression softened slightly. "Heard of you. You ran freight down to Port Mason before the war." "Long time ago." "Long enough." The visitor took off his hat, smoothing his hair. "I'm here on behalf of the harbor master." Clara's shoulders tensed. "I didn't know I owed anyone a debt." The visitor smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Not money. Information." She crossed her arms. "About what?" He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "A ship went missing off the South Channel 2 weeks back. The Meridian. You might remember it." Her face changed. "Not much, just enough." Thomas saw it and felt the air go taut. What does that have to do with her? The captain's manifest listed a Clara Donovan as contact of record. Passenger list says she was supposed to be on that ship. Clara's voice was quiet. "I changed my mind." The visitor nodded slowly. "Seems so. Still, the inquiry needs statements from anyone connected to her name. You were expected to arrive in Charleston. When you didn't, it raised questions." "Questions about what?" Thomas said. The man studied them both. "About why a woman buys passage, never boards, then disappears for 7 days before turning up here." Clara smiled thinly. "Disappearing's something I've always been good at." The visitor didn't return it. He set the paper on the table. "You'll need to come into the office tomorrow. Just formalities. Bring identification if you've got any." "I don't," she said. "Then bring the truth," he said, putting his hat back on. "That usually weighs the same." He gave a curt nod and left. The door closed behind him, and the sound of the sea returned. Slow, steady, merciless. Thomas turned to her. "You want to tell me what that was?" She picked up the paper, turned it over, set it back down. "Nothing that matters." "It matters to me. I didn't get on the ship," she said. "That's all." "That's not all." She walked to the window, staring out at the gray horizon. It was supposed to be an easy way out. South Channel, 2 days sail. A man waiting at the other end. He felt something old twist in his chest. "A man." She nodded. "Not what you think. He had worked for me, or said he did. But I changed my mind before dawn." He waited. "I stood on the dock," she said, "watched the ship pull away. I felt nothing, just the wind and the salt. That's when I knew where I needed to go." He studied her. "Here." "Yes. And now the sea brings a reminder." She turned, tired eyes meeting his. "The sea never forgets, Thomas. It only waits its turn." He sat down, running a hand through his hair. "So what do we do?" She shrugged. "Go to town tomorrow. Tell them what they want to hear. And if they want more, then we tell them less." He looked at her a long time. "You've changed." "So have you." "No," he said. "I just stopped pretending." That night, the wind came back strong, rattling the glass and shaking the chimney. They sat by the fire, the paper lying untouched on the table. Neither spoke of it, but both felt what it meant, that whatever peace they'd found was built on borrowed time. When the lamp went out, she said softly, "He wasn't wrong, you know." "About what?" "About the truth. It does weigh the same as everything else. Maybe more." He turned to her. "You planning to carry it alone?" She met his gaze. "I always have." The wind rose again, dragging the sea closer. Somewhere out beyond the dark, a bell tolled once, slow, distant, final. He said, "Then tomorrow, we go together." She nodded, but didn't speak. Outside, the tide climbed higher up the rocks, inch by inch. And in the silence that followed, the first crack began to show in what they'd built. Chapter 5. The Road to Town. The morning came cold and clear. Mist hung low over the water, silver in the light. The house looked smaller in it, like something fading from a dream. They left early, before the gulls began their noise. He walked ahead, the road rough and wet beneath his boots. She followed a few paces behind, her coat buttoned to the throat. The road wound through pines and low grass. The sea stayed on their left, quiet for once, pretending calm. Neither spoke for the first mile. It was easier that way. Silence had become their truce. At the ridge above town, he stopped. "You sure about this?" he said. She nodded. "You don't come this far just to turn around. Some people do. I'm not some people." He smiled faintly. "No, you never were." The town was small, a cluster of slate roofs and narrow streets pressed against the shore. Smoke rose from chimneys, mingling with the fog. The harbor smelled of salt, fish, and diesel. As they walked in, people turned. Not rudely, just curious. Strangers were rare here, and she was something more than that. The harbor master's office sat near the docks, a two-story building with peeling white paint and a bell above the door. Inside, it was warm and smelled of tobacco. A man sat behind the counter, gray hair, thick hands, a look that had seen too much sea. "You must be Hale," he said. "And you're Miss Donovan." She nodded once. He shuffled some papers, then looked up. "Inspector Raleigh said you'd be coming." "That's right," Thomas said. "Take a seat." They did. The chairs creaked. Outside, the gulls cried over the boats. The harbor master adjusted his glasses and studied the papers. "Ship went down the 12th, South Channel. All hands lost." Clara said nothing. "Thing is," the man continued, "the manifest says you were supposed to be on it." "I wasn't," she said. He looked at her over the frames. "Care to explain?" "I changed my mind." "That's not much of an explanation." Thomas spoke then. "She didn't get on the ship. That's all there is to it." The harbor master's gaze shifted to him. "And you're speaking for her?" "I'm speaking with her." The man leaned back. "Look, I don't care about your business. I just need to close the file. There's insurance involved, government paperwork, the usual. If she's alive, we mark her alive. But if she's here under another name, that's another story." "She's not hiding," Thomas said. The harbor master grunted. "Everyone's hiding something." He tapped the paper. "You knew the captain?" Clara hesitated. "Once. Close." She looked down. "Close enough. That's what I figured." He took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "We found a few things after the wreck. Papers, a compass, a gold locket with your initials on it." Her eyes lifted. "Where?" "Washed ashore near Port Mason." He studied her. "You sure you weren't on that ship?" She met his gaze steadily. "I'm sure." Thomas could feel something tightening between them. The air, the memory, the truth not yet told. The harbor master nodded slowly, as if making a private decision. "All right. I'll mark it as clerical error. But you might want to be careful, Miss Donovan. The sea keeps better records than I do." She stood. "I know." He looked at her once more, then turned to his papers. "You can go." They stepped back into the cold light. The wind off the harbor cut through their coats. Thomas said, "What locket?" She walked ahead. "It doesn't matter." "It seems like it does." She didn't answer. He caught up to her near the pier. "You going to tell me?" She stopped, staring out at the water. The sea was restless again, rolling under a pale sun. "It was his," she said. "The captain's. He gave it to me once. I left it with him the night before the voyage." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Why?" "Because I wanted him to remember me." "And did he?" She turned, eyes steady. "He did. Until he drowned." The words hung between them like smoke. He looked past her, to where the horizon met the gray. "You loved him?" "Yes." "Before or after me?" She smiled without humor. "Does it matter?" He didn't answer. They walked again, slower now, the sound of their steps drowned by the surf. When they reached the bluff road, he said, "You could have told me. I could have told you a lot of things. You still can." She shook her head. "It wouldn't change what's already gone." The wind lifted her hair. The coat flashed red against the pale dunes. They climbed in silence until the house came into view, small, waiting, full of everything they hadn't said. At the door, she stopped. "I didn't mean to come back here, you know." "I know. But I did." He nodded. "You always do." She looked at him then, long enough for the years to fold away. "The sea took him," she said quietly. "It doesn't get to take you too." He stepped closer, the air between them tight. "Then stop trying to give me away." She didn't move. The wind pressed against them, carrying the sound of the tide climbing the rocks below. And somewhere beyond that, faint but sure, came the toll of the harbor bell. once, then again, as if counting down to something neither of them could name. Would you like Chapter 6 to open that same night, as the tension between them finally breaks, or the following dawn, when an unexpected message arrives from town? Chapter 6, The Night Tide. The fire had burned low by the time they returned. The house was warm but felt empty, as if it had been listening for them and grown tired. She went to the window, set her hand on the glass, and looked out at the black water. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and brought one to her. She took it, but didn't drink. Hard day, he said. She nodded. Feels like they're all the same. They're not. No, she said softly. Some just end worse than others. He sat in the chair near the hearth. The wood popped once, small and sharp. Outside, the wind had shifted east, bringing the smell of seaweed and iron. You never said his name, he said. She didn't look at him. What would it change? Nothing. Then why ask? Because you've been saying everything but. She turned, the firelight flickering in her eyes. You think knowing makes it easier to carry? I think it makes it real. She took a slow drink. The glass trembled slightly in her hand. His name was Aaron, she said. Thomas nodded, the sound of it landing heavy in the air. You were with him before the war? After, she said. When you were gone. When I thought you were never coming back. He let the silence take its time. And when I did. She looked down. I tried to forget. You wanted me to. I wanted to start over. She met his eyes. And I tried. But the sea doesn't care what we want. He stood, crossed to the window. You came back to bury him. Maybe, she said. Or maybe to see if something was still alive in me. And did you find it? I don't know yet. He turned toward her. The room was small between them. 1 step, 2 breaths, a history. You think this, he gestured between them, is still alive? She hesitated. I think it never died. It just went quiet. He moved closer, close enough to smell the salt on her skin. You left me without a word. I know. You broke something I never thought could break. I know, she said again, and her voice cracked on it. He reached out, touched her hair, then stopped. Why come back, Clara? She looked up at him, eyes shining from the firelight. Because I wanted to see if you still hated me. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. I tried to. How'd that go? Didn't take. She smiled then, a tired, fragile thing. It never does it? No. She set her glass down on the sill. We could leave, you know. The world's bigger than this coast. He shook his head. You'd still hear the sea wherever we went. Maybe that's the point, she said. He studied her. You running from it or toward it? I don't know anymore. The fire dropped lower, the light softening around them. Outside, the tide was coming in, slow, deliberate, certain. He said, you could stay. I don't deserve to. Neither do I. For a long time, they said nothing. The wind moved through the chimney, a low hum like the sea breathing. She took a step toward him, then another. When she reached him, she stopped just short. I don't want forgiveness, she said. I'm not offering it. What are you offering then? He looked at her, tired and raw. A place to rest. She nodded. That might be enough. And she kissed him, slow, deliberate, the kind of kiss that remembers too much. He held her face in his hands, the way you hold something you've already lost once. When they broke apart, she whispered, it's still there. He nodded. It always was. The wind rose, the waves hitting the rocks below like the pulse of something old and steady. She leaned her head against his chest, eyes closed. He said quietly, what happens when morning comes? We pretend it's another beginning, she said. Will it be? Probably not. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. That's all right. They stood that way a long time. 2 people bound by what the sea gives and takes, by love that doesn't heal but endures. Later, when the fire was only embers, she said, the tide's high tonight. It always is when something's about to change. She looked at him. You believe that? I've lived enough years to know the sea keeps its own calendar. Outside, a single wave struck the cliff hard, sending spray against the window. The sound made her shiver. He drew her closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Then let it come. Chapter 7, The Shore. He woke before light. The room smelled of salt and ashes. Beside him, the bed was empty, the sheet still warm. He rose, dressed, and found the front door open. The wind moved through it, slow and steady, carrying the sound of waves below. She was down on the beach. He saw her from the bluff, a small red shape against the pale sand, standing where the tide met the earth. He walked down the path, boots damp from the night rain. The sky was the color of smoke. The sea rolled in quietly, like it knew it had said too much. When he reached her, she didn't turn. There was something at her feet, a piece of wood, dark and broken, caught in the foam. It came in with the tide, she said. He knelt beside it. It was a fragment of a hull, cracked, barnacled, worn smooth by the water. The paint was faded but still visible, meridian. He looked up at her. The ship. She nodded. What's left of it? The tide pushed another small piece in, a rope, a torn scrap of canvas. The sea never gave up much, only what it chose. He touched the wood. You think that's the end of it? She shook her head. The sea doesn't end things. It just hides them. The wind pulled her hair across her face. She didn't move it away. He stood and looked out at the horizon, gray, endless, indifferent. You think this means something, he said. It always means something, she said. The sea doesn't send things by accident. He looked at her a long time. What do you think it's saying? She hesitated. That I'm not finished paying for what I did. He stepped closer. You didn't do anything wrong, Clara. She smiled without looking at him. We both know that's not true. The water lapped around their boots. The sound was gentle, almost kind. He reached out, took her hand. Let it go, he said. She looked at their joined hands, then out at the sea. You can't let go of something that lives in you. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, but he couldn't. The truth was too heavy for words. They stood there until the sun came, slow, pale, uncertain, turning the water silver. When they climbed back up to the house, the air was warmer. He built a fire. She made coffee, silent, precise. The driftwood fragment lay on the porch rail, drying in the light. After a while she said, There'll be people from town. They'll come when they hear. Let them, he said. They'll have questions. I've got answers. She smiled faintly. You don't even know the questions yet. He took a sip of coffee. Doesn't matter. The truth's simple enough. And what's that? That you're here. That's all I need to know. She looked at him over the rim of her cup. You always did make faith sound easy. It's not, he said. It just doesn't change. The day grew long and still. Around noon, the first villagers came. 2 men and a woman from the harbor, curious and cautious. They asked about the wreckage, about what they'd found. Thomas showed them the wood. Washed in this morning, he said. We thought you'd want to see it. The woman nodded, tracing the faded letters with a finger. That's her, all right. Anyone else find anything? He asked. Not yet, the older man said. But sometimes the sea takes a week or 2 to give back what it owes. They thanked him and went. When the door closed again, the quiet returned like an old friend. She was at the window. They'll keep searching, she said. Let them. The sea's bigger than their nets. She turned. You really believe that? I have to. Evening came slow. The sky bled pink, then gray. They sat outside as the light faded, the fragment of the meridian between them. She ran her fingers over the splintered wood. He's still out there, she said. He didn't ask who she meant. He knew. The wind picked up again, carrying the smell of rain. The horizon darkened. He said quietly, You think it's coming back? The storm? She nodded. She looked out at the water, the way a believer looks toward an altar. It never really leaves. He reached for her hand again. She didn't pull away. Below them, the tide rose, slow and certain, brushing at the rocks like a promise. And when the first drops of rain began to fall, she said, almost to herself, Tomorrow it'll bring something else. He asked, What do you think it'll be? She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, where the light was fading. And in that silence between the sea and the storm, he knew that whatever came next would change them both. Chapter 8. The Second Storm. The first wind came just after midnight. It rattled the shutters and whistled down the chimney. Thomas woke to the sound and knew before he looked, the storm was back. He went to the window. The sea below was white and moving, restless and mean. The rain had started, fine and slanted, driven hard by the wind. Clara was already up. She stood by the hearth, the firelight on her face, wearing his old sweater, her hair damp. You feel it too, he asked. I heard it coming, she said. Before I slept. You think it means something. I always do. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. You and your signs. They're not mine, she said. They're the sea's. I just listen better than you do. He poured coffee that had gone cold, drank it anyway. The house groaned, an old ship fighting its own weight. You could have gone inland, he said. You still could. She shook her head. Not yet. Afraid you'll miss something? Afraid it'll miss me, she said quietly. The rain grew heavier. Outside, the surf hit the rocks in hard, irregular bursts, not rhythm, but fury. He went to the door, opened it just enough to look out. The air slapped him with salt. Down below, where the bluff met the narrow stretch of sand, something glimmered in the lightning, small, dark, half-buried. He turned. There's something down there. She came beside him. What is it? Can't tell. Looks like he stopped. The wind tore the rest of the thought away. They went together, coats pulled tight, leaning into the weather. The rain stung their faces. The ground was slick with mud and kelp. When they reached the beach, the tide was high, gnawing at the cliffs. The thing in the sand was wood again, but not just wood. A box, square, iron-banded, the kind used on boats for gear or papers. Clara knelt, brushed the wet sand away. Her hands trembled. Thomas, she said. I see it. The name was burned into the lid, barely visible under the sea's wear. A. Ward. He felt the breath leave him. Aaron. She didn't speak. She just stared at it, as if the sea itself had written his name there for her to find. The next wave came higher, washing over their boots. He grabbed the box and lifted it. It was heavier than it should have been. They carried it back to the house through the wind, both of them silent. When the door closed behind them, the sound of the storm was like distant applause. The fire had nearly gone out. He set the box down on the table. The wood was soaked, blackened at the edges. Do you want to open it? He asked. She didn't answer. Her face was pale, her lips tight. He found a knife and pried the rusted clasp open. The lid groaned, then gave. Inside were papers, half ruined, tied with cord. And beneath them, a compass, brass, the glass cracked but still intact. She reached for it, her fingers tracing the edge. It's his, she said. He nodded. You sure? I gave it to him. They stared down at it together. The needle shook, then stilled, pointing north, steady as a pulse. The rain hammered the roof. The wind pressed against the house like it wanted in. He said softly, Now you've got what you came for. She looked up at him. You think that's why I came? Wasn't it? She shook her head. I came because I didn't know how to stop waiting for him. And now? She looked back at the compass. Now I do. He waited. She ran her thumb across the cracked glass. It doesn't matter which way it points anymore. He's gone. Thomas exhaled, slow, like it hurt to let the air go. He said, Then maybe the sea's finally done talking. She smiled. A small, broken thing. The sea never stops talking. It just changes who it's speaking to. A gust hit the side of the house, shaking the windows. He went to close them, but she stopped him. Leave them, she said. Let it breathe. He watched her a moment. The way she stood by the fire, hair tangled, face lit gold and shadow. She looked like she belonged to the storm. He said, You'll leave tomorrow. Maybe, she said. You will. She looked at him then, steady, clear. And if I do, I'll still be here. The wind roared. The fire flared. The compass needle twitched again, though neither of them touched it. For a long time they stood that way. Not lovers, not strangers, just two people caught in the long echo of what they once believed in. When the storm eased near dawn, she sat by the table, her hand over the box. He said, You should sleep. I can't, she said. If I close my eyes, I'll hear the waves. He smiled gently. They're just waves. No, she said. They're memories pretending to be waves. Outside, the horizon was still dark, but the light was coming. The kind of gray that means morning's near, even if the world doesn't want it yet. She looked at him one last time. You said once the sea was a church, she whispered. He nodded. I still think it is. Then I guess this is my confession. He reached out, touched her hand. And this, he said, is your absolution. The wind quieted. The compass stilled. And somewhere beyond the cliff, the sea swallowed the rest of the night.